to sort of see again how the guidance policy is laid out. You'll be able to see, I think, well, let me say this a different way. I think it may answer a number of your questions. So I'll try to let you know, hold that question until we get there. So for number 2, the program writes and implements a child assessment policy, including developmental screening. The program uses a state-approved assessment tool. This is one that really did not change substantively. Okay, now it gets interesting. This third criterion you saw before, but it was at star level 3. And there was one that was kind of in this place and that links to it in terms of quality that was at star level 2. And as we were working on all the different pieces that would go in the guidance manual and discussing these 2 criteria, we came to realize that the one that you now see before you is more of a foundational criterion. So we flipped them. So this one, program staff observe children and regularly document those observations to plan and implement curriculum and practices that prioritize each and every child's differences, abilities, and sense of belonging. So we saw this one again as more of a baseline and a place at star level 2 from which we could scaffold up through the tiers in relation to pedagogical practices. Criterion number 4, staff who lead a group of children must complete a self-assessment of practices that support social emotional competence. The program uses a state-approved tool. Some of you will recall that this one was here, but we've tweaked it. What we had in here initially was a self-assessment of practices to support, I think it said staff-child interactions or maybe educator-child interactions. And what we came to realize in talking with our federal technical assistance partners and others in our group is that we really wanted to use a tool that had been developed for a self-assessment. And so, and we decided, or we came to the idea that we really wanted to have a choice as well. And so what we will have for tools in relation to this will be, we'll have choice of tools. It will be one section of the Strengthening Families self-assessment, the appropriate one, or TPOT. And I guess the other thing that I would say about this is, of course, social emotional development of social emotional competence in children is a critical facet of teacher-child or educator-child interactions. See whether I missed anything. Okay. Number 5, the program provides supportive environments and the program staff provide nurturing and responsive caregiving. So we heard you on this one. Some of you will recall that what we had here before was a placeholder language that referred to the specialized childcare professional development training. And we understood that that was a great strategy toward moving toward supportive environments and nurturing and responsive caregiving, certainly, but it really wasn't the language that we wanted to have for a standard. And so we came up instead with this language that relates to educator-child interactions and environments. We had extensive discussion on this one among Head Start, AOE, and our CIS folks. Number 6, the program demonstrates how it considered the costs of care and program expenses when creating an annual budget that supports program stability. Definitely some tweaks to the language, but the substance remained the same on this one. Number 7, the program provides weekly paid planning time to those responsible for curriculum planning. This one also did not change. And then number 8, which also did not change, was our continuous quality improvement plan. The program develops a continuous quality improvement plan, which identifies goals with action steps and a timeline. The program regularly reviews and updates the CQI plan as necessary. The CQI plan should include staff input if applicable. So this takes us to the part of today where it's open for your questions. Tricia.
Hi, everyone. Tricia from Vermont After School. Trying to lower my hand. There we go. Okay. So, a couple of things. So and if there are other after school folks on this call, especially those in direct service, I ask that you speak up, but I'm trying to understand, when we had this discussion last time, we were told if applicable, right? And now you're saying not if applicable.
Right.
After school programs are not assessing children or screening children. I don't see how number 2 is applicable to after school programs. That's my first point.
Can I stop you there and tell you what our thinking was?
Yes.
So when I looked at the materials from, I saw something a little bit different that I went back to notes and saw had come from you, and that was that after school programs could use the DESA Mini to do screening. Is that not right, or did I get that wrong in my notes? Or
it's a tool that's available, but it's not used regularly, and it's not something that programs would typically do. Our role as after school providers is not to assess and screen children. I feel like that's different for early childhood.
Yeah.
I mean, if they're an after school program, they're also going to school during the day, and that's usually when that stuff is happening. Certainly, I think we could have a policy for, if we notice in our observations that there's something like that developmentally doesn't seem right, that we would want to help refer. But we're not going to be assessing or screening children. I feel strongly that that should not be in there.
Tricia, let's have an offline discussion about this one.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
And it seemed like you had a second question, though.
I did. Again, the program observes children and documents to plan the curriculum. I mean, again, that's not something we're doing to plan our curriculum. For after school, it's more about youth voice, and that we're just incorporating the children's interests into our program. We're not observing and documenting. Where, we're implementing youth voice and choice.
Right. And so I would say the same thing. We would love to have an offline discussion with you about it, because there may be a way. So the first question I would put to you is, would finding a way to keep after school in these 2 criteria improve quality, and would it be something desirable to after school folks? And that's where we would focus. But rather than take a lot of time to hash it out here.
All right, that's fine. But I just want to make the point. I'm going to push back, because we worked really, really hard in the first iteration of STARS to create a separate application that was for after school, because it is different. It is not apples to apples. And now I feel like we're trying to do the same thing, fit everything into this one form that's going to work for everyone, and it may not. And
It may
so
not.
I feel like we should have this discussion here because this is a stakeholders group. And to have it just with me offline, I feel like I've had those discussions and I'm really trying not to be difficult, but I am trying to advocate for what I think is best. And again, if there are frontline after school folks here, please feel free. My last question was, and this may be answered in the guidebook or in the, but number 5, how are people going to document this? The program provides supportive environments and is nurturing and responsive. How will they document that?
So that's one of those questions that I said earlier. When you have an opportunity to look at the evidence, we have already figured
Okay.
that out.
Okay, great. Thank
Yeah.
you.
You're welcome. Yeah. And I really appreciate you bringing this point. We actually anticipated it. And it's why we have the collector tool. It's why we have the STARS email. It's why we have the opportunity to bring folks together who want to talk about it. And we're wide open to do that. And I wanted to make that really clear.
Okay, I'm just, if this is going to be a requirement for everybody to get 2 stars, you're not going to have after school programs being able to get 2 stars.
Yeah. So again, I think rather than, because we have so much on the agenda
I
today.
understand. I just,
Yeah.
okay.
Other folks, I don't mean to shut you down, Patricia. I just want to make sure that everyone has a chance to.
So I have one thing, Amy. In number 3, it looks like it includes 2 very different, I mean, they're obviously related, but 2 very different and distinct criteria mushed into one criterion. And I'm interested in sort of why. I think the conducting observations and documenting the observations, and then the separate piece around implementing curricula and practices that prioritize children's differences, abilities, and sense of belonging. Obviously, those are integrated, but they're really different practices, and I wondered why they were combined into one criterion.
Yeah. So our thinking around this was we had this criterion before, and it was at star level 3. And we hadn't really had this comment before, but our thinking was that it doesn't neatly fall into one bucket, first of all, that it really falls into that pedagogy bucket. It also falls into the, the inclusion or DEI kind of bucket as well. And that's fine. That's true with a lot of these criteria. This sort of the impetus, the thing that drives having this criterion here. And again, that is articulated in the guidance. So when you have an opportunity to see that, you'll see it. Is the idea, which has not been a part of our system for star level 2, observing, documenting what you see, and then applying it to curriculum and practices. And so what you see might be something that speaks to you and says, wow, we really need to prioritize and change our practices, modify our practices to embrace this child who is BIPOC, for example. I'm just making this up, but that's kind of the way that we saw them interconnected. And if others in my team would like to kind of jump in and comment duly noted, we'll take a look at that. But do others have stuff they'd like to add? Stacey, I see your hand up.
Sure.
Sorry, go ahead, go Stacey.
Thank you. I mean, I think I'm stepping a little out of turn here, but I kind of want to back Tricia up or add the voice. I run an early education program, but I'm part of a center that serves after school programs as well. And I think Carrie, if my after school director was here, would really echo the concern that if the goal of the STARS criteria is to improve quality programming, I don't see that King Street Center would be able to, given the way the staffing is, but would that child assessment, developmental screening, that piece of it, that would help enhance quality of programming, given the kind of how very different after school is. We do run, I think, a very high quality program, a 5-star program that would not meet this 2-star bar. And I guess I would like to echo the concern that I know we can't hash out every single, piece, but if the point of a stakeholders meeting is to benefit from everyone's collective wisdom and to hash these things out and deal with a little discomfort, I feel like this is why we should be here to kind of go back and forth. Maybe there are other folks. Right. So I just want to say I share the concern, but I'm more concerned about having one-on-one conversations when I feel like the point of a stakeholder group is to use everyone's collective wisdom here in this process.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So again, kind of in an effort to get through what we have for today, let's bookmark this one and come back if we have time today. Because I want to make sure that we get at least through the the most of the agenda that we've set out for today. But again, we would love to pull a group together, talk through it. We're not closed to putting, if applicable, back in and taking after school out. We left it, we decided to take it out for this one and see what would, come to us for discussion. And, so there's, none of this is set in stone, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Does that work for you to bookmark it, or would you like to have that continue with that discussion now? Because we do have several people here who could certainly contribute and or who may wish to move further.
Amy, did you have something to add?
Oh, it wasn't anything about the after school programs. I was just going to talk about number 3, just the observation and documenting and how that can help drive the instruction. I mean, that's something that we do discuss as well on a pretty regular basis. That's all. I was just kind of going off of what Amy was commenting on. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you. I mean, for admin. All right. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to move the rest of all of us on to the next set of criteria and bookmark it. We can decide if as we get further in the agenda whether we want to come back. All right, so I just switch my slides over. Okay, so programs, you can see that here we're moving beyond the foundational and promoting children's learning and development through observation and child assessment. So number 1, the program leader implements strategies to support all staff in continuous improvement and development. This particular criterion had some language in it that was about relationship-based strategies. And we had a number of folks who questioned the inclusion of that language and didn't know what it meant, things like that, or thought that it could be better defined or we could change the language. And what we realized was that we didn't need to have it here. It's a perfect thing to go in the guidance and be defined there. So that's what we took out. Number 2, the program implements high quality pedagogical practices and environments. I'm seeing something in front of my screen now. Are others seeing that as well? Yeah, oh, there we go. Okay. The program implements high quality pedagogical practices and environments that consider the needs of each and every child and align with Vermont's current early learning standards, the BELS. Practices are developmentally appropriate, equitable, and responsive. This is the one that we switched that builds on criterion number 3 in star level 2. Otherwise we didn't change it. We just switched its place in the system. Number 3, the program completes a self-assessment of family engagement practices using a state-approved tool. This is where this one builds from the criterion in star level 2, where we talked about a self-assessment of social emotional competence related practices. And in this build, we're talking about using the strengthening families, the appropriate strengthening families tool. Or a different tool. There are a number that we have to choose from. And so otherwise no change though to this one. The language remained the same. Okay, this one is a complete change, and I'm going to skip it for a minute and come back to it, because number 5, there was nothing substantive. There was maybe a word change to make it, or a few words change to make it more specific, but the substance remained the same. And I would just note as an overall comment with all of these, that we did see, as we looked at the system, that there was a mix of some indicators and standards versus standards, or what we call criteria, that didn't seem appropriate to us. So as we were redoing these criteria related to stakeholder feedback, we had a focus on them being standards versus indicators. Yeah, so number 4 we put it here because we want to hear from you. We want your input. It was a late addition. And last night when I brought this one forward, I put Luann on the spot a little bit and asked her to talk a little bit about it. And I'm probably going to get this wrong, Luann, but essentially what you referenced was that while you have some discomfort with the system, the way it's being revised, and having standards, as a standard, this is one that is foundational and appropriate for STARS level 3, and kind of is one that would be aligned with Louise Stoney, the opportunities exchange, materials and strategies. Did I get it right?
I would say that I think what we know from working with Louise Opportunities Exchange and the work that I've done for the past 8 or 9 years, we believe that programs utilizing software to manage the childcare business is important. I do have concerns as it's listed as a criterion or a standard in this way.
Yeah.
But again, as you said, I have differences with the
Conceptually.
whole approach. So
Yeah. But conceptually, in terms of this standard, you would support it. Conceptually, not maybe the way it's worded, because we had some great suggestions for wording we've had a couple of suggestions, and we'll probably go back, but we did want to get your input related to the substance behind it. What I kind of saw as I was exploring it, and others were exploring it, and what we talked about is that there is a cost associated with this, but the cost generally becomes negligible if a program increases its enrollment, and in other words, it can be covered by that. Deb, I saw you nodding.
I'm nodding because I'm thinking about what I hear from some of the students in the CCV courses that I teach around this. And I agree. I think it's important. I do think that it's cost prohibitive. And I also think that that there's a whole training piece that would come with this. And what I hear from students is that in the smaller programs, they just don't have the time or the capacity to onboard with something like this. So I don't know how we could support that, but I agree that it's important.
So one of the thoughts that we had, there will be some criteria where, for example, if a program is part of a school district, let's say, that school district is going to have a budget, and that school district is going to have, fiscal management software. And so there may be a way to just not have to take on this cost, or, you know, a program wouldn't need to do it themselves, obviously, if they were in that place. But this is precisely just the kind of input that we've had so far from you is exactly what we're looking for.
So you're saying fiscal management, that to me is different than childcare
Childcare management, it is, but a larger organization might have that as well. I mean, you know,
So what are you looking for here? Are you looking for
Well-
to make sure that their record, their financials are, you know, being monitored and
Yeah.
tracked in software, or are you looking for how we case manage children's behavior? Because when I first saw that, that's what I thought it meant.
That's what you saw. Yeah. I think, I mean, I guess I would defer to someone like Luann, who is more knowledgeable. My quick look at it was that the childcare management software programs, and really literally, I think I spent 15 minutes because I didn't really have more than that time, but I would defer to you, Luann, to say it looked as though it relates to the fiscal aspect, that it increases fiscal stability among organizations. And so I think that there's probably some interplay. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, going in 3 different directions here.
They're related.
Childcare management software is to manage your financial business transactions, as well as often communication with families, but primarily for fiscal management, collecting tuition, billing families, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And you know what's great about your question, Deb, is
Nope.
that we're going to have all sorts of things like this, and we're going to have a definitions section in the guidance manual. And so, you know, if you look at it and you see what you see, somebody else is going to look at it and see that or something else, you know. So we're going to need to have lots of definitions, and we're planning on that. All right.
Just one quick thing, Amy. The only thing I would add here is sort of like who pays for it and what supports are in place. I do think, you know, being cognizant of, I think being really cognizant of the fact that this is a very different burden for a small program than it is for a large program. And, you know, consideration of what sort of impact, like financial impact, meeting this criterion might have connected to a program's ability to say, you know, they may look at this and be like, forget it, I'll just stay at 2 stars. Like, you know, what kind of tipping point might that be?
Right. And that's a great way to frame it. And your comment reflects all the discussions that we're having internally as well. And so we're kind of looking at to see if there are any mechanisms to support it in that way, monetarily. All right. So I'm just going to stop here and say the next pieces of our agenda are to talk about evidence. And, you know, we mainly made the switch because so many people said, how can I give input on a criterion without knowing what this piece is going to look like? So we just kind of decided we would have 5-star criteria at the next meeting and throw ourselves all of our energy into working on the evidence. So that's our next piece, and I'm going to hand it over to Joanna to do that piece.
Are we not doing
did I not do level? Oh, I'm so
Are we not
sorry.
doing level 4?
I didn't do level 4. I spaced. So much for the good night's sleep, right? All right. So here we are at STARS level 4. Sorry about that, you guys. And same thing, I'm going to just walk through. So the idea here is that there is more of a focus on those high quality learning environments with curriculum implementation and a focus on social and emotional interactions, enhanced focus. Okay, so for the first criterion, the program receives an assessment of all classrooms by a state approved assessor using a state approved assessment tool. Let's see, that one remained the same. And that is, you know, the one where with which you know, programs have familiarity now. That's class or an ERS tool or a different tool. But anyway, there will be choices for that. Number 2, the curriculum implements a culturally, developmentally, linguistically, and individually responsive curriculum that promotes all areas of child development and is informed by family voice. So this one builds on some prior. It's really about, pedagogy, the curriculum, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this one was really mixed with the next one. We got several comments that there were 2 that were glommed together, kind of like your earlier comment, Becky. And so we teased them apart. And in doing so, we realized that this one is really about curriculum, pedagogy, teaching children, and being informed by family voice. And the next one, criterion number 3, the program integrates parent and family caregiver partnership strategies into policies and into program services aligned with those policies. This one is really at a different level. So rather than being at that kind of practice child level, it's more at the organizational, administrative program level, if you will. And with that one, we just wanted to make sure that you knew we will define and articulate and guidance those family caregiver partnership strategies. Number 4, the program implements a wage scale that recognizes qualifications and length of tenure in the field. The program reviews the wage scale annually and revises as needed. I think we tweaked the language slightly, but substantively, this one remained the same. And number 5 also did not change substantively. The program implements, monitors, and updates a CQI plan using multiple sources of evidence. The plan is formed and reviewed with staff input and family engagement. So, time for your questions about stars, the 4 stars level criteria. Yes, I think there's a hand up, and I'm just trying to see who that
Stacy?
is. Stacy.
Sorry, it's me. Lower my hand. I guess I'm just wondering about the software one, only to comment that when you track the stars criteria, like number 1 through the 2 level, 3 level, 4 level, I can kind of see the we're upping the ante each time, like how it's deepening your practice. The software one feels kind of like plopped in there with no step before or after.
Yep.
I'm not sure that I have, if that's really a question, but I guess I defer to Luann's
Great
expertise. If Luann says it helps programs be better, I accept that. But I guess I almost wish there was a next one, and now when you have your software, you demonstrate that it deepens your practice by blah, blah, blah. I just kind of random or arbitrary.
So no, that's perfect. And there are 2 places to go with that. So bear with me. The first is that we struggle with the same thing. We have been clear for the last, how many years it's been that we've been working on this system, that we really wanted to, if we were to have a system that is still tied, that's revised, but not completely thrown to the winds and torn apart and redesigned. And we maintain standards in the system and work toward the redesign. We have been clear that business practices have kind of a special place, if you will, in relation to quality. And I think that's reflected in these criteria. We struggled, and we thought, well, what we really want to say at every level is the program, I'm just going to throw this out there, this isn't the exact language, but the program uses and maintains practices that contribute to stability of the business, something like that, right? And where we got stuck, and maybe you all can help us with this in a minute, is where we got stuck is that, so then what? Then we just pick one business practice? And for each level, do we just have that same language, but then how do we describe that in guidance? What do we do with that? Because we want that to be part of the system. Vermont has decided we want it to be part of the system, but how do we create a standard that could appear at every level in that business bucket, right? So that's one piece. The second piece is that if you had a critter and you could see it, and you could see that backbone of CQI in that critter, you would also see PD as a backbone of that critter. It's like, if you could have two backbones, you would. PD is, you'll see it running through the guidance, running through, kind of backing up lots of the criteria. We made an explicit choice not to have criteria based on PD because they are really more of an indicator or a strategy. PD is. So having made that choice, and that choice was made long ago, and it's one that the current group is fully in support of, what we see, given that a program at star level 2 will meet certain criteria and then go to star level, let's say that program goes to star level 2, they will still need to show that they're meeting those star level 2 criteria. But it may be something as simple as, hey, we submitted our policy manual / handbook last time, and we're just working on, so you're not going to submit it again. We haven't made any changes, but the area improvement that you'll see in our CQI plan, you can show it in the CQI plan, which is required at each level, is this on that criterion. That's what we'd be looking for. So we wouldn't be looking for resubmission of the same thing over and over and over. We're looking for that build that will show up in the CQI plan. And Joanna, you may have a better way to say that than I just did, but I think it's meaningful here.
So I think what you're trying to explain, Amy, might be a little clearer, more clear as we go through the evidence.
Yeah, I agree. So that was kind of a roundabout way to, Stacy, to address your question. I don't know if I really got to it. Hoping to hear yay or nay. I can't see you.
No, I mean, I think, Amy, I appreciate the intention behind it. I'm just thinking like of our own, the families we serve, they don't, or whatever, billing, subsidy, like there's a lot of other pieces to it. I feel like just took us years just to get a database up and running, but I guess if it's part of your own CQI, I could see the way we could keep using it in a way to make our practice more cohesive. I appreciate your response.
Okay. All right. And as I said before, if this group has some idea to embrace that fiscally sound business practice idea in a standards-based system, a better way to do it than the 3 standards that we have that represent foundational important practices for programs, we're all ears. Okay, I see that there's a hand up. Beth.
Yes, thanks. So I just wanted to kind of ask, since I know part of the goal of this is to reduce redundancies and things like that, and I think I've brought this up before probably, but just with that first piece, having the state approved assessor, come and do an assessment. I'm just curious about, because I've been part of programs that are linked, that are partners to Early Head Start or Head Start, or that are NACI programs or things like that, and those are considered like, the national gold standards, right? So I'm just wondering, what what the reasoning was behind this to have that be a redundancy, if these programs are already going through these other rigorous sort of processes.
Yep. So similar to the system we have now, we will complete crosswalks, and programs that have had an assessment, like a Head Start assessment or an NAEYC, will likely not have to do this. And there won't be redundancy.
Okay, thank you.
That answer? Yeah. All right. Now, move to that next piece, Joanna.
Okay. So, okay, so what we are looking at here is a picture basically of all the different potential types of evidence that could be used to verify that programs meet the criterion, and whether or not they are required or optional pieces of evidence. And so as we look at this, there are a couple things I just want to explain to folks about these different pieces of evidence. In the column where it says policy manual / handbook, that can, that I'm hearing a little bit of echo, so I'm not sure. Is everyone else hearing that as well? Yeah. I'm not sure how to fix that. I'm just going to keep going. So in the last column, policy manual / handbook, that could be a policy manual, that could be a family handbook for a family child care program. It could be personnel policies for, I mean, it's a whatever the program has that functions in that functions for those pieces of evidence. The R's are obviously pieces of evidence that are required. The O's are pieces of evidence that are optional. In the case of a criterion that has both required and optional evidence, the optional evidence supports what's required, and applicants can choose one of the several options in support of the required evidence. So you wouldn't have to do more than one of the options for each criterion. There are a couple, and in the case of if there aren't any option, obviously if there aren't any options listed, then there aren't any options. All the criterion are required. Completed forms, just because that might be another one that people are wondering about. If a program uses ASQ, for example, for child screening, and the criterion is completed form, because what we've seen in the past, sometimes people will send a blank form, which is great. Then we know you have the blank form, but we don't know that that it was actually used for child screening, so we'd ask for it to be completed. Any questions or comments that people have about this evidence chart?
So obviously we will have a similar evidence chart for STARS levels 3 and 4, but we just wanted to show you this one so that you could get a sense of where this one stands. Tricia?
Yeah, so going back to the one that I originally had mentioned, the program provides supportive environments and program staff provide nurturing and responsive caregiving. Tell me what you mean I see that it says self-assessment results and professional development. So again, what would they be showing you that would prove that they do that?
So,
Like, I know I know it says self-assessment results in professional development. So you're saying they
Right.
would show you that they did some professional development around how to be nurturing and responsive?
or I think in some of those cases, it would be they had professional development around the use of the program tool that they used for self-assessment. And we'll get into that a little bit more when we get to the we have a slide for each criterion where you go over the evidence. So I may be able to explain that better, or you might at that point, or you might continue to have more questions.
Sure.
when we
Okay.
get there too.
I'm sorry.
No, that's not, that's fine. I should have said that at the beginning, that we were gonna go through all the criteria individually side by side. Any other question? Oh, Melissa Jackman.
Hi, yeah, I hate to do this, but we've got a major storm coming. I gotta get off now and get the kids in a secure place. They're calling tornado warnings.
Oh gosh, well, I hope you all be
Tornado
safe.
warnings.
Yeah.
65 miles an hour gust of wind right here in
Where are you?
Lindenville.
you?
Lindenville.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
Yikes, well, definitely be safe.
okay, I just gotta jump off now.
Okay. Well, that's not good. Hope they're all gonna be all right. Does anybody have any more questions about this particular slide, or if not, we'll move to the next one. Okay, so for criterion 1, the program implements written wellness policies, and the two pieces of this is one criteria, but there's actually two parts to it. So the required evidence is a policy for wellness, but it's actually two policies, one for child wellness and the other for staff wellness. And then the optional evidence is any one of the 6 things that are listed here: CQI coach report, activity photos, or videos, etc. You can use the same type of evidence for both, to support both the child wellness policy and the staff wellness policy, but there needs to be one piece of evidence for each thing. So, and folks may have a question about what does a CQI coach report? So there will be an option for programs to use a CQI coach to help them work on their plan. And the coach will be, we're assuming that there'll be some type of information that's gathered and kept about the CQI process by the coach, who could report back and verify that the program is working on their policy, writing and implementing their wellness policy. Any questions on this one? Stacy.
Sorry, I feel like I'm being difficult.
It's okay.
I think I just, on some basic level, I don't understand this criteria. I appreciate it. I think I know what's intended. A policy, when King Street Center has a policy, we are like obligated to fulfill. It's not like we aim to or strive for. Like, policies are, children with a fever of 104 can't be at, that kind of. So I really want to make sure I understand what this is. Wellness meaning, I know it's not the illness policy, but we're talking about
this would be more like nutrition and physical activity for children. It would be more like for staff, place for them to have a quiet break or, things that support the well-being of the staff rather than, like Amy said before, it's not really about not being ill. It's more about promoting their well-being.
Yeah.
Right.
Does that make sense?
No, I mean, it does. I just think this one is, I think it's really important, and I think it's like the oddest one of the group. It's just something about, I think wellness needs to be defined. I guess you're saying there will be definitions, but I think if that,
Yes.
maybe that's
Yes.
what I'm struggling with is like,
Yeah.
I feel like wellness is such a,
Yeah.
so big. So
Yeah,
I
I mean, I can see, I get your point. It's sort of a catchphrase. There's a whole wellness industry and that's a whole other thing. So sure, we can make that more clear in the guidance.
okay.
Yes,
Yeah,
and
good.
we do have a definition and supporting evidence and rationale and all sorts of things for folks to look at, to be, to think about.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions before we move on to Criterion 2? Okay, here we go. Program writes and implements a child assessment policy, including developmental screening. The program uses state-approved assessment tools. So there's 3 pieces of required evidence for this criterion, and one is the completed screening tool. Another is documentation of follow-up based on the completed screening. So if, for example, in the process of the screening, it was noted that there was concern about a specific child, how did the program follow up with that, making referrals and working with the family? And then the last thing would be a written policy in the policy manual / handbook. And the state approved tool at this point in time is the ASQ3, and if needed, the ASQ SE. Any questions and concerns about that? And Tricia, we do note that you're concerned about this criterion for after school programs. And Stacy, does anybody else have any comments or questions they have?
The only thing I was wondering, I can understand a completed screening tool, like sort of making sure people know how to do it. Documentation of follow-up based on the completed screening. Would there be an expectation that
No.
the program is submitting all documentation of completed? It just feels like a hefty burden.
No, it wouldn't be. It would be one example.
Okay.
And we wouldn't assume that all screenings would result in referrals being made. Probably not very many would. And the type of documentation that we're thinking about for that is that there is a legal requirement for the program to have a signed release by the parent before making a referral. So they would send us a completed form for that with personal identifiers redacted for
Got it. Thank you.
For confidentiality and to protect the privacy of the family and child. So that would be that's the thinking for that one. Okay, if we have no more questions or comments, then I will go on to criterion number 3. So this is program staff observe children and regularly document those observations to plan and implement curricula and practices that prioritize each and every child's differences, abilities, and sense of belonging. So the evidence for the required evidence for this is an example of a completed observation form and an example of a curriculum plan that is connected to that observation, so that the applicant is kind of drawing us a picture of how they've used their observations to plan activities and curriculum for children. If the program uses TS Gold. They can use their TS, what they've done, the work they've done in TS Gold as evidence, but it's not a requirement at this stage. The other thing that I would note here is that Tricia, you and I had a preliminary conversation about what would work for this, for after school programs. And we did, I mean, we really haven't fleshed this out yet, but I was thinking that this would be more about youth voice than about children being observed. It's
Yeah,
more
so-
about empowering children in the
Right.
or children or
So I
youth in
just
the
put that-
program to self-direct. Yeah.
Yeah, I just put that in the chat. I think the
Okay.
intent, we want to base our curriculum on what the kids want, need, according to their development and all of that, but it's not through observation and an assessment. It's really through different means, letting kids have their voice. And so I think we need to flush this out a little bit more for after school.
Right. And I mean, yeah, I think we do need to have some more in-depth conversations about that, and you and I connect on that one. And Stacy, since you have an after-school program and you're here, we can loop you in if you're interested in being part of that, helping us gather this information about how we can do this well for after-school programs.
Sounds good.
Any other?
Just said sounds good. Thank you.
Any other comments here for criterion number 3? I think, Becky, you had some questions about this. Are you a little more satisfied now that you've seen what the evidence is?
Honestly, mine is more of a sort of philosophical thought on it, as opposed to anything. I don't think there's anything problematic here at all. It just really feels like 2 separate criteria to me, as opposed to being 1 criterion. I don't see anything problematic. I think observations with an observation form, curriculum planning with curriculum plans, all of that makes sense.
Yep. Okay, thanks. Okay. Can we go to the next slide then? So this is staff who lead a group of children must complete a self-assessment of practices that support social emotional competence. And the program uses a state approved tool. So we are thinking about the self-assessment tool would be strengthening families, or it could be another tool. It could be the teapot, or it could be now I'm just going to look the pyramid model practice self-assessment, and then depending on which state approved assessment tool the program chooses to use, there might be an additional piece of evidence that we would require.
So is this to staff lead? Is this this is a self-assessment of the program's practices and how they're supporting kids, right?
Yes.
Right. So the
It's not children.
The SELPQA tool could work,
Mm-hmm.
would work. The only problem is that's really not recommended until they've used the other tools.
Mm-hmm.
So
it wouldn't be good at this
level
where they haven't
it's
done-
like we're saying at level 2, you've got to use the SEL tool, when really that, again, it's tricky.
Okay. Yeah. Yep. It is. This one is one that I would say every time we sit down and talk, it changes, and we learn a little bit more about how we could best how this best would work in the system. So I appreciate your input.
I do think for clarity, we could add the word program of program practices. I think actually it was there and it dropped away. I don't know why. But anyway.
Yeah, because, well, I don't want to get into that. Oh, I think I understand why we left it out. Wendy.
Yeah. So,
please jump in here.
Wendy, AOE UPK coordinator. So in this, this was not necessarily the program practices, it's the teachers.
Mhm.
That's where that self-assessment comes in. It would be the
Mhm.
teachers' practices, not collectively. It's looking at more of the teachers. I mean, you could pull all the self-assessments together and go over it as a program, right, to see where in the curriculum, but it's really about collaborating and knowing what your strengths and maybe things that you may, challenges that you may need to work on for your for your teaching practice.
So that's a really important finer point that will influence what we put in the guidance. Because really the early MTSS, you know, that tool is more focused the way that you describe. This strengthening families, that section of that tool is really more program focused, but it is done as a team and preferably includes parents as well, or, you know, family members and caregivers as well.
Okay. Are there more comments or questions about Criterion 4? And if not, let's go to the next slide. Thank you. Okay. So this is the program provides supportive environments, and program staff provide nurturing and responsive caregiving. So there's two pieces of required evidence from this: results from the pyramid model practice self-assessment and certificates of completion of training in the VELS modules that are going to be offered.
And again, this is geared towards early childhood. Like, there's nothing in here that relates to after school. Again, the training in VELS, which is the early learning.
Mhm.
And I know you're going to say it goes up to 3rd grade, but again, you know, you're kind of lumping after school in again, where I'm just going to keep saying it until someone says you're right, because this doesn't work for after school. This is not, this evidence doesn't work. I feel like I'm back in the olden days where I'm that voice again saying, what about after school when this all started? So I apologize for those of you that don't know me, that sound like, that it seems like I'm sounding like a squeaky wheel, especially since I don't have a voice. But, you know, it's really important that we get this right for after school as well.
I don't think you'd find any disagreement there, Tricia.
I just want to add a little to what Trisha's saying. I think that what we're trying to get at here are that learning standards are being addressed, and that VELS are a tool of learning standards that are used by many but not all. So perhaps there's an opportunity here to articulate the other learning standards that are utilized in Vermont in other organizations. I think this VELS is something that'll work for a lot of early childhood programs and will work for a lot of AOE programs, but not most after schools are not using the VELS. So, but I think there's an opportunity here. I think there's an extra bullet that could be for after school, provide evidence of VELS or fill in the blank for the other learning standards.
And that's why we didn't have the VELS in the standard itself. It says Vermont's current standards, specifically for that reason. And remember, again, that all of this is why we have you, is to tune us in and be squeaky wheels and tell us what we could do better with this. It's still all in draft stage. It's not gone for promulgation. This is a good time for me to say, I think that we're putting together a PDF, which we are planning and hoping will be ready to get out to you by end of the day tomorrow, for you to look at and use those avenues. You know, any meetings that we pulled, additional outside meetings that we pulled together, the collector tool and email, to help us make this the best it can be.
And Wendy, I saw your hand up and I thought you might have a comment on that would be helpful in this conversation. So
Right.
I'm gonna go back to you if you don't mind.
Yeah, so the VELS is birth to age 8 or grade 3, but it's also developmentally appropriate. And it's also based on NACI and DEC. And all the Common Core and all the standards, educational standards that's the foundation of this. And it's the foundation of our work as early educators. And I agree with Tricia that this may not be appropriate for her programs. But I also was wondering, Tricia, if you could address this for me, because I have a question about you not observing children and them having a voice. We do that in early education. I was just wondering, could you explain how you don't observe them? I mean, and how would you know like their interests? I mean, you can ask them, but then you could also observe that the little guys are like, oh, they're playing with the blocks more. So let's incorporate some more enrichment activities. If you could just answer that, that'd be great. Thank you.
I mean, we're certainly observing kids all of the time, but it's not formal observations like it would be for early childhood. There is no TS goal. There's no, we're not like filling out observation forms and then inputting them anywhere. It's more informal observation, and it's through asking kids, giving them a voice, whether that's through forums with kids. It depends on the age group, if it's middle schoolers, it could be forums, it could be surveys. There's many ways that we get to learn this information from kids, but it's certainly not through, a formal observation.
Right, and we do informal observations all the time, and we're putting sticky notes on walls as we're going around stations. Okay, so-and-so really liked this, or this child was having trouble here, I'm going to make a note. So those are all pieces that you're using that may not look like teaching strategies goal, like an assessment form, but you are doing an informal teacher evaluation, an observation that will lead to inform your activities and enrichment for the students. So you are doing that.
I know that.
Not in a formal, and that would be evidence that you could use in STARS. That would be.
Well, not according to, okay, all right.
Well, so that's, yeah. So we can adapt that for sure. That's the other, well, I don't want to get stuck on this because we've got to get going or we'll run out of time. But thank you for that feedback again, Tricia, and we'll keep working on it. Criterion number 6. I'm going to move on to that one. The program demonstrates how it considered the cost of care and program expenses when creating an annual budget that supports program stability. The evidence is all required, a completed budget. Programs can use a budget template that will be provided in the guidance, or they can create their own budget, or seek other sources like shared services for a budget template. A policy manual, handbook statement that says that explains how the program determined their costs and their cost of care and their expenses and create the budget, and required documentation of professional development and business practices for the person who is responsible for fiscal management of the program. Any questions or comments that folks want to make about this one?
Just one quick thing, the very last bullet may or may not be necessary depending on the new revisions to the childcare licensing regs, that there may be some requirements in the regs related to the PD for business practices. Obviously, still your prerogative of whether or not you insert it here as well, but I just wanted to note that that's something I know is in discussion.
That did come up last night as well, and we were wanting to know more about what that required training would be, but Yeah, so that's a question yet to be determined. Thank you for bringing it up, though. I see Beth has a hand up.
Thanks. Just really briefly, I understand the budget piece, I understand the PD piece. For the policy manual handbook, what sort of thing would you be looking for in there? Is it just kind of the fiscal policies or a tuition policy, or what sort of thing are we talking about?
Well, it would be evidence that the program considered costs of care and program expenses. So it would be a statement around that, or a description of that process.
What I said last night, and it's something I've just read and thought a lot about, is that a handbook can be a really important communication tool in the sort of early childhood programs community. So a statement about how the costs of care, and as many of those true costs of care as can be included, are translate into tuition, for example, can be articulated in a handbook. And we're not asking for the whole budget to be in the handbook, but a statement that explains for relevant parties how those tuition rates are set. That sort of thing is what we'd be looking for.
So for example, it might be a section in our handbook that talks about our accepting subsidy, or, that we try to, obviously, well, for many programs, the cost of tuition, tuition does not pay for the true cost of care. And so we also seek grants, blah, 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 that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay. Any other questions for Criterion 6? Nope. Okay, so number 7, the program provides weekly paid planning time to those responsible for curriculum planning. 2 pieces of evidence for this, one required and one optional. A statement in the policy manual / handbook indicating the planning time policy, and then optional CQI plan. This could be something programs are developing, or CQI coach report, posted daily schedule, curriculum plans, or staff survey responses. Does anybody have any questions or comments about this one? Beth?
So there's no real statement about how much planning time. I know that like an hour a week is pretty standard, but is there going to be any kind of requirement about the amount of time that we need to show?
I don't know the answer to that. I think it will definitely be clarified in the guidance manual. We tried to leave all these criterion very generally worded so that, for example, if we decided the guidance was for an hour a week of paid planning time, and at some point that seemed like not the right amount, we would be able to change it. So that's why it's not, without going through the whole legislative process. That's why it's not in there, but we definitely can make that be part of the guidance if it's not already. And I just don't honestly know what's in the guidance on this. Any other questions or comments about this? Okay, we're moving on to criterion number 8 then. And this is about the the continuous quality improvement plan. Two required pieces of evidence for this. One is obviously the plan itself. And the second is any one of the options: CQI, coach report, policy manual, handbook, professional development, staff assessment results that can inform a current CQI plan, and staff survey responses. And we'll be working with Child Trends and other experts on developing guidelines and procedures for the CQI plans. We'll be considering input from the 2020 CQI work group that was part of the earlier revision process. And there will be a grantee who will be helping us to create templates and processes, etc. So those are some other things that are going to be going on behind the scenes of the CQI plan. Are there any other questions or comments that people want to make about this criterion and the evidence? And if you think of things that you didn't get to say in the meeting, the collector tool will be available tomorrow, and you'll be able to add comments to that. And at this point, I am going to pass it back over to Amy to talk a little bit about the guidance manual.
You're muted, Amy.
Okay, sorry. We can pop beyond this slide. This is a repeat of a slide from previously. And Maggie, if you could pull up. There you go. Okay, so this is a draft guidance manual. This is not to be distributed or shared outside the stakeholder convening group at this time. As I mentioned before, we're going to send you a PDF. You can see we have some, just for reference, some program types and acronyms. And if you could just go to this one, Maggie, this is great, because we were talking earlier about wellness. So if you could just scroll down a little bit. So you'll see it tells, to which settings the program actually, yeah, I just wanted to go to those definitions. Yeah. So you'll see that with any criterion that we have proposed, once it's finalized, we will have a section in here that talks about, gives some general information and goes to defining pieces of the criterion that we think need definition, but we're looking for input from you. There is also going to be a definitions appendix. Oops, it's really small now. Can you make it a little bigger? Maybe a little bigger even than that. And so you'll see with this particular one, we have wellness for children and wellness for staff. If you could scroll a little further. I said stroll, I meant scroll. And you'll see if there's anything required. For example, there is a requirement. You'll see a process for the program to meet that requirement. You'll see the evidence, which we kind of just went through. Then you'll see a resources piece that will be brief because it will speak directly to the evidence. But then in the resources section, you will see something. We haven't figured out the language exactly. It will be something like, for additional resources related to the following topics, go to the resources section, and we will have links. And you can go to those links. We'll have verbiage that will explain. If you want to go down to the bottom of the document, Maggie, we can kind of show an example of that. So here, she's just passed. So here you go. So you'll see for rationale and standards related to self-wellness, you have this, you have just a bunch of, excuse me, a bunch of different resources. And they go beyond. And if you scroll up a little bit, Maggie, this is where we get into some of the definitions that will be important. So as I said, we're going to get you a PDF. We're going to be looking for your input. It's going to be a super drafty draft still at this point, but we've spent days and days and days working on putting these materials together so we could get them to you. And similarly, once we have, you know, we've really finalized the standards, we'll have, we'll get it back out to you again for star levels 3 and 4. And we can certainly come back to this piece. You guys had so many, you people had so many great questions and comments that it didn't leave us much time for this section, but what we spent our time on was just right, you know. I really believe that with any meeting, you spend the amount of time that you need to spend to cover the topics that are important for the folks who are at the table. And so, you know, look forward to having some offline meetings, a meeting with after school folks and others around that table. I don't know, it's 2:30. If folks want to stay and see that quick kind of run through of what the online application looks like so far, to see our progress on that, we invite you to do that now. And otherwise, I see rain starting in 64 minutes with heavy wind and, you know, thunderstorm, severe thunderstorm warnings. So for those of you who want to go, we'll look forward to seeing your input put via the email and the collector tool. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
People going. All right.
All right. Well, for those
We
folks
can
who
jump
would
in.
just like to take a quick peek, this is Maggie with CDD, and I have been revising the paper application onto a online form, which gives me new appreciation to how much that was needed. So we've you know, it's doesn't transfer 100% onto an online format, but we've been working on making it as streamlined as possible, removing duplications that are in BFIS and giving it the capability to upload documents and do that sort of thing. And we expect that these this online application, which is for the current paper applications, the same one. It won't incorporate anything new until things go live next July. But right now, it will be available when the website revision for CDD and STARS is complete later this month or early next month. So you'll be able to start using it pretty soon. It will be fillable online, you know, as a lot of them are, with dates and all of that sort of thing. It will prompt you if you have an error, as that's represented. For the sake of just a quick demo, I included only one arena to give you an idea, and it's probably the one that will be the most cumbersome arena for filling out, even for this online example. There I am. I tried to pre-populate some of these so that they would be easy. But for the main portion of this application, there's only a few questions that you need to fill out. The majority of the questions that were in the paper application were covered in BFIS. So essentially, these are all the questions that will be on the main section. Getting through them probably will take you no more than 2 or 3 minutes. And once you're done with that, you move on to the arenas. For the professional development arena, you will still have to do some of the calculations on your own. But the drag and drop feature will be easy. You can just pick some, you have a folder with all of your documents right there. It will be quick and fast just to upload those things in the right places. You will have to do some of the calculations here for educational scores and professional development and tallying some of those things. But below, some of those will be auto-populated, so you'll be able to skip those portions. Oops. All of these are still here for reference. The instructions for how to fill those out will also be on the website, so you don't have to toggle back and forth, or you can print them out so they're easier to see. And then you can submit. So that was just a quick demonstration just to say it's coming along. We'll have it up so you can make use of it. It will only get better as the new system, the new criteria are in place, and we can go more to the block system so that some of these pieces aren't as necessary, and it'll only look more wonderful then. But here's where we're at right now, and just wanted to show that to you if you were interested.
Beth, you have a question?
Yes, I'm sorry. I feel like I have a lot of questions today, but I'm just curious. So as I've been looking through these pieces, in terms of the staff qualifications, since that's the one that was put up, it just jogged my memory. It's not been clear to me where in the new system that's going to fit in. Is that still going to look like this, or is it just the staff self-assessment piece? I'm just not quite sure. Oops.
So this chart, this is Joanna, I'm jumping in, but others please do so too.
Yeah.
So this particular chart will not be in the new application. And so far as from professional development is going to be used in various places as evidence to support the program has met the criteria so far, but the program is not going to be rated on things like how many people have a BA in their program, for example. That's different from the old system to the new system.
Sure, thanks.
Wendy?
Yeah, hi, Maggie. Could you go back to the first page? I was kind of at the bottom. This is kind of weird, but it said submit next to the next button, and I wasn't sure if in drafting it that you can. It was like the first page. It said submit and then next, and you went to the next slide. I think that might cause some confusion if it's on
Yeah,
submit.
I think we're already talking about taking that.
I'm sorry. It's just something I
No,
was like,
it's okay. Yeah.
because this is the first time I've seen this, so I was like, wow, that might be confusing for me if I.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah, we
thank
can
you.
talk
Sorry.
about it. Great.
Beth, you have another question?
Of course. So my next question is, with some online forms, you have to fill in every field before you go on to the next page. And I'm just wondering if that's going to be the case. Are we going to be able to see the whole application at one time? Will there be like a PDF or something like that, so that we don't just have to fill in one page completely and then move on to the next one, so that we can sort of see it as an organic whole?
This will save your work as you go, so that you'll be able to go back, and even after you submit it, you can make changes to it. That capability will be there. I don't think you'll be able to see it in its entirety.
But we can probably do a PDF of it and have it with the instructions so that you could look at it that way. We could have a PDF version that as sort of an example of
A little piece
what
of
the whole thing
history.
looks like.
A little piece of history that might be prompting that question is that in the Strengthening Families grants, we use JOT form. And there have been over the last several years when we've been using the JOT form, people who hit save and it didn't save their work. And we came to understand that it might be the browser. We just never could quite get to the bottom of what it was. But what I did is sent out a Word document to all those grantees so that they could see it in its entirety. They could get all their answers prepared, and then they could just cut and paste into the document everything that they needed. And it was I think a help for folks.
Yeah, I was just gonna, checklist, an application checklist is what we use for the universal pre-K online application. I was just thinking that, but it's similar to what you're doing, Amy, so that the information's right there.
That's a great idea.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful to allow us to have some sort of template format, whatever, that's not the website, just so if something crashes, whatever happens, we've got that somewhere else. Because yeah, Amy, I've had that experience with JotForm before and other things, web grants, whatever. And I think that having that sort of in a second format is helpful, and the cutting and pasting is not that onerous. So thanks.
Welcome. Thank you for posing the question. That might be it for questions.
Oh, wait, just one more, just one more.
Good. Yeah,
building
please.
off of what Beth said. So I was thinking, like, with the UPK application, the state's built it so that you get a PDF after you complete the application. And that would be great for programs so that they could, like Beth said, then you can, if something was wrong, Beth, like you were typing in, you're like, oh no. It would be there too, so that you could contact the STARS office and say, oh, I meant to put this and didn't, or etc.
Beth, I know that the JOT form sends you something. What does it send you?
It sends you a confirmation email, and I'll have to check out more what's included in that email. When I tested it out, I can't remember what it gave me, but it gave me a synopsis. I don't know how detailed it was, so I'll check into that. That's a good question.
I think at the bottom of that confirmation email, there's a link that says edit this link, and you can click on it and then read through what you've submitted. And because I've had people say to me, oh, I hit the edit this link, and I noticed that I, needed to edit this section because it wasn't clear, and can I submit again? And I say, yeah, thank you for letting me know, why it's coming through a second time.
Well, and I think one of the things that's important about being able to, get a copy of what you've submitted is that, next year or whenever, you have that information. Okay, this is where we were, this is where, we are now, it's kind of helpful to not reinvent the wheel kind of thing each time, and I don't know how often it'll be happening, but and I don't know if the next year going online, if it's going to autofill any of that stuff for us, or if it's, going to be starting from scratch again.
Do you have an answer for that, Maggie?
Well, I think that because we don't yet know what the new application is going to really look like until we get through this process, we'll know more then. I would love for it to be able to. I'm not sure if JOT forms will do that for us, or if we should search for a different method. That's sort of to be seen. But it being able to save for subsequent years submissions is the ideal. That's what we're looking for.
Yeah.
And that would start with next year's. With the new application, this is the one we're looking at right now is just the current.
The matter
is
the old one.
Yeah, right just now. To provide convenience for this year to alleviate some of that paperwork.
All right. I think that's it. I think we only have a couple people left, but thank you so much for joining us. We really been great to have you. It's been great discussion today. A lot of really good information. So we appreciate your time.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yes.
Thanks for all the questions.
Be safe.
Thank
Stay
you.
dry. Yeah.
Have a great day.
All right.
Beth. Hi, everyone.